So, of course, vector graphics are great, and we use them a lot in motion graphics, but another important thing that we do use in motion graphics is we use a lot of rasters. So, any good motion graphics composition usually takes in a pretty good combination of rasters and vectors. And we need to know how to deal appropriately with raster graphics as we need to know how to deal appropriately with vector graphics as well. So a good workflow for dealing with raster graphics is to use layered Photoshop files as compositions. It's a good way to jumpstart something, especially if you're working on something for print, if you're cutting people out of backgrounds, if you have some original photography that you've worked with. Any number of cases, I mean, you can list them all off, but Photoshop's a good starting point for creating some graphical compositions in After Effects that can be later on animated. So I have a classic example here of we have somebody who's been punched out of a background, right? But maybe we want to apply a little bit of motion to that in After Effects, and maybe we have, let's see here, if we look at our layers panel in Photoshop over here, we've got a person on a cutout on a background. We've also got a texture here. Textures are pretty popular in terms of overlaying and multiplying over top of vector graphics work to give it a little bit more visual complexity. So we've got an example of a texture here that we may want to use, but we've also got like a background for the person. So maybe we could bring this into After Effects and we can fade the background in and out, fade the person in and out. This is fairly straightforward. There's not a whole lot of organization that goes into this. Just make sure everything's stacked appropriately in layers. You may want to rename everything here, or you can rename it later in After Effects. I'm going to delete this background layer because I'm not going to use it. It doesn't matter if you keep it in. If you keep it in, you can turn it off. But anyhow, just by virtue of saving this as a PSD file, which I've done, pshop.psd, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say, yeah, I want to save that as a PSD with all the layers. Now I can go ahead and I can go into After Effects. And once I'm in After Effects, I can go ahead and I can import that PSD file as is. That's the nice thing about all of these being Adobe products. So remember when we imported our Illustrator file, we used composition. Well, why don't we use it again? Composition, retain layers. So we have this selected. We're going to open it. And it actually is going to prompt us. Are you sure this is what you want to do? Yeah. These are some options that you have here where you can merge layer styles into the individual Photoshop's compositions that you have. You can merge your layer styles into the rasters, or you don't have to, but this is an option that you can take. So drop shadows, bevels, things like that. You can have them regenerate in After Effects and be editable at the After Effects level, or you can keep them in Photoshop. So that's what that question's really about. That doesn't really apply to our example right here, but that's what that's about. So I'm going to press OK, and very easily Photoshop created a composition. This is a little bit easier of a workflow than Illustrator, so there's some relief there that it doesn't take quite as long to work through that. But you'll see I get a Photoshop, or I get an After Effects composition, and look, it's got my layers here that were in Photoshop. Pretty simple, right? So obviously I can animate these like anything else. What I am going to do is I am going to go to my composition settings. Control K is the shortcut for that. And I'm going to change this to a 720p composition because that's what I like to work in. And you'll notice, I've got everything here and it's sized differently. So you could do a good bit of manipulation to get everything kind of dialed in and appropriately in the way that you want it. I can grab onto the girl and bring her more to the center. I can grab paper texture and bring that a little bit more to the center. I can do this bit where I bring the background in. Something else to point out is that you can solo certain layers by clicking on this white dot here. That's pretty helpful if you just want to get a particular layer dialed in. So I'm going to go ahead and maybe scale that up a little bit. I can maybe up the size just a little bit so I can get a better view of that. So now you can take this and you can animate it like anything else, right? So maybe we want to give it kind of a spatial effect. We've got this girl here. Whoops. We can look at her as a layer, right? But really what I'm interested in doing is changing the name of it to girl. And we've got that, and then we've got this is a background from Shutterstock. So maybe we want to fade this out. We want to make the girl get a little bit larger, have her scale in, right? So let's go back to our endpoint where we want this to end up. That's probably the scale I want her to ultimately end up at. but maybe she scales down, or maybe she scales down from 35, right? She looks like she's coming forward. I can use shortcuts P. Shortcut P gets me straight to the position value. I'm going to drag her down just a little bit so she stays on screen. And pressing U will show you all of the keyframed attributes that you've had so far. That's a handy dandy trick, right? And when she gets up here, maybe we want to bring her up just a little bit. So anyhow, those are some ways, and some popular ways that people will use raster graphics, just as a quick tip. And so maybe I want to fade this off, right? So make this here. T gets you opacity, not terribly intuitive, but T for transparency, I'm assuming. And we're going to fade that out slowly. So maybe I'm going to right click and add that keyframe in that state. Go out here. I'm going to change that to 0, right? So it's completely faded out, right? Something like that. And then maybe we just have this background kind of, you know, scaling down as she's coming out, right? So make that a little bit larger. And then see as it fades out. We scrub it, you get that effect, right? So there it is. We can go ahead and preview it. There we go. So there you have it. That's just quick tips for how to get raster graphics in as layers. It's pretty straightforward.